Brace yourself for New York's dirty secret. Beneath the neon dazzle, tens of thousands of desperate souls wage a nightly battle for survival in plain sight, but silenced by the city's roar. Here, in the city that never sleeps, thousands drift from one subway station to the next, seeking warmth, a hot meal, or the slightest hint of hope. Their faces, weathered by wind and rain, trace a path through glass towers and gilded lobbies, underscoring a silent crisis at the heart of America's largest metropolis. As skyscrapers rise higher, so too do the stakes for those left behind, forced to navigate a landscape designed for prosperity rather than survival. Tonight, we step into their world. Their voices echo a truth the skyline prefers to silently ignore. The city's concealed realities. In the heart of New York City, the homeless crisis has become impossible to overlook. From the avenues of Queens to the doorways of the Bronx, makeshift shelters cluster under overpasses and alongside chain-link fences. In many neighborhoods, the sidewalks have transformed into impromptu communities, complete with stoves, donated clothing racks, and the hum of generators. In this travel documentary exploration of New York's underbelly, the contrast between opulence and desperation becomes impossible to ignore. Every night, more than 60,000 men, women, and children sleep in the city's shelter system, twice as many as just a decade ago. Tens of thousands more live outside the official count, hunkered down in parks, subway cars, or the doorway of a friendly bodega. Winter temperatures push these numbers even higher, as local nonprofits report a 30% spike in unsheltered individuals when the mercury dips below freezing. This isn't an abstract statistic, it's a grinding reality for families and individuals who once held steady jobs and paid rent on time. Single mothers, veterans returning from deployment, day laborers, and newly arrived asylum seekers now share the same fragile existence. Their paths to homelessness vary, but the outcome is the same. A daily struggle just to remain visible enough to receive help yet invisible enough to avoid eviction. What happens when the city that never sleeps turns its back on the people who need sleep the most? As early morning commuters rush past, these communities become ghosted, their stories erased by the glare of Times Square's neon. Yet, behind every threadbare tent lies a person with ambitions, regrets, and the simple desire to belong. Much like a travel documentary unearthing hidden worlds, this article aims to shine a light on the people whose lives unfold in the shadows of skyscrapers. If you're moved by these untold stories, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel to join us on this journey into the unseen corners of New York City. To understand the full scope of this crisis, we must investigate the forces that have driven so many from stable housing into these streets. Comparative landscape, New York and neighboring cities. Just down the I-95 corridor, cities like Philadelphia, Boston, and Washington, D.C. grapple with homelessness in ways that both mirror and diverge from New York's crisis. In absolute terms, New York towers above its neighbors, with roughly 140,000 individuals using its shelter system on any given night in 2024, while Philadelphia recorded around 600 people in emergency housing and street outreach programs in the same period. Yet raw totals only tell part of the story. Population size and local policy shape each region's unique challenges. Philadelphia's per capita shelter occupancy hovers near 7.8 per 10,000 residents, compared to New York's 17.4. Despite smaller numbers, unsheltered Philadelphians face similar cold weather spikes. Outreach teams logged a 25% increase in unsheltered counts when temperatures fell below 32 degrees Fahrenheit in January 2025. Meanwhile, Boston's combined emergency shelter and transitional housing census reached approximately 7,300 people in winter 2024 to 2025, driven in part by rising rents that climbed 8% year over year. Washington, D.C., with its smaller footprint, sheltered nearly 6,380 men, women, and children nightly in early 2025, plus an estimated 1,200 sleeping outdoors. The district's aggressive Housing First pilot has reduced chronic street homelessness by nearly 50% since 2018, but limited affordable stock and high operating costs keep waitlists long. New York's similar pilot programs have produced early wins, but on a scale 5 times larger, logistical hurdles multiply. Even in nearby Newark, New Jersey, the challenge remains stark. Around 4,800 residents cycled through shelters and transitional programs in 2024, a figure that eclipses its pre-pandemic total by 30%. With the city's population under 300,000, that rate translates to roughly 16 people per 10,000, comparable to New York's, and highlights how suburban and satellite communities shoulder overflow when Manhattan and Brooklyn resources max out. These comparisons reveal surprising dynamics. New York's absolute numbers dwarf those of its neighbors, yet per capita rates show Boston and Newark facing equally intense pressure on a smaller scale. Philadelphia grapples with higher proportions of unsheltered individuals, while DC's innovative programs showcase what streamlined housing-first strategies can deliver, if only more units were available. Across every jurisdiction, heavy winters strain shelters, and rent hikes push new families onto the streets. With these regional contrasts in mind, let's now examine how government interventions aim to translate lessons from neighboring cities into scalable solutions for New York. Fundamental drivers of displacement. At first glance, New York City's skyline is a testament to human achievement. Yet this very success has fueled a dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. Over the past 5 years, average rents in Manhattan have climbed by nearly 15%, outpacing wage growth for 80% of working households. Neighborhoods once considered affordable have seen rapid gentrification, displacing long-term residents who suddenly find themselves priced out of the only community they've ever known. Economic inequality is only one piece of the puzzle. Mental health facilities across New York State have shuttered nearly 30% of their inpatient beds since 2010, leaving thousands without critical support. Individuals discharged from hospitals without a stable home often wind up in shelters or on the streets within weeks. Similarly, substance use disorders remain both a cause and a consequence of homelessness, creating a vicious cycle that few can escape without dedicated intervention. Immigration patterns add another layer. In recent years, tens of thousands of asylum seekers have arrived, many lacking the documentation or social networks to secure immediate housing. While shelters have opened emergency barracks, the sheer volume has strained the system, pushing some to sleep on subway benches or in dilapidated legal aid clinics. What happens when wages fail to keep pace with spiraling costs? How can anyone survive when earning a living wage no longer guarantees a roof overhead? These questions haunt every corner of the city. Economic shocks, like a sudden job loss or an unexpected medical bill, can trigger a cascade of evictions and court fees, rapidly eroding the safety net for families living paycheck to paycheck. The result is a perfect storm: skyrocketing housing costs, weakened social services, and systemic gaps that funnel vulnerable populations directly onto the streets. To stem this tide, New York's response must address both the symptoms and the structural roots of the crisis. With root causes mapped, it's essential to consider the social welfare structures in place to catch those teetering on the edge of homelessness. Frameworks of social protection. New York's social welfare apparatus represents one of the most extensive in the nation, yet demand continues to outstrip resources. Central to the effort is HRA Home Base, an early intervention program designed to keep families in their own homes. Case managers work with landlords to negotiate payment plans, while legal advocates fight unwarranted evictions. On any given day, home-based specialists visit hundreds of at-risk households, offering rental assistance and tailored guidance. Meanwhile, the Department of Social Services operates the Homelessness Prevention Administration, providing short-term grants and zero-interest loans to cover rent arrears. These funds have successfully prevented eviction for thousands, yet many recipients remain one missed paycheck away from crisis. Outreach teams, from mobile health units to faith-based nonprofits, cruise subway lines and park edges, offering warm clothing, hot meals, and referrals to emergency shelters. Shelter facilities themselves range from dormitory-style safe havens to scattered site apartments with wraparound services. In recent years, the city has expanded its supportive housing model. Permanent, subsidized apartments coupled with on-site counseling for mental health and substance abuse. Early data suggests these units reduce chronic street homelessness by up to 40% in pilot neighborhoods. But can these measures truly restore dignity and stability? Many shelters still operate at double their intended capacity, and wait lists extend for months. For families with young children, bouncing between temporary hotels and overcrowded facilities compounds trauma and undermines educational continuity. Within this network of assistance, volunteers and nonprofit leaders remain the unsung heroes. They distribute donated backpacks filled with toiletries, organize pop-up medical clinics, and host job training workshops in church basements. Those efforts often make the difference between a single night on the streets and a path back to self-sufficiency. While these programs offer vital relief, the full scale of the crisis demands bold government action, which we will explore next. Strategic policy responses. In response to mounting pressure, New York City and state governments have launched a series of ambitious programs aimed at stemming the tide of homelessness. The state's 5-year, $25 billion housing plan commits to creating or preserving 100,000 affordable homes, with particular emphasis on interweaving support services into each building. At the same time, the city's Bridge to Home initiative allocates $30 million to integrate mental health clinicians and substance use counselors directly into hostel-style facilities where individuals can begin immediately upon entry. In the boroughs, pilot programs have turned vacant hotels into safe haven shelters, offering private rooms, case management, and guaranteed pathways into permanent housing. Yet funding alone doesn't guarantee success. City Hall has also enacted zoning reforms to mandate that new developments include a percentage of below-market rate units, pushing gentrification to carry its own social tax. Landlords who fail to comply face hefty fines and may lose tax benefits. Meanwhile, the Human Resources Administration's home-based teams have expanded their reach, providing eviction prevention services in every community district, negotiating rent freezes, mediating landlord disputes, and connecting families to emergency cash assistance. By blurring the line between housing and healthcare, these government interventions aim to treat homelessness not as a law and order problem, but as a public health crisis. But will these policies scale fast enough to match soaring need? The coming months will test whether legislative muscle can truly translate into stable roofs and safer streets. With government action underway, the next layer of this crisis falls on community groups and nonprofits. Grassroots engagement and nonprofit leadership. Alongside municipal efforts, a web of grassroots organizations has emerged to fill gaps in the safety net. Street Outreach NYC teams patrol every borough each night, distributing meal kits, winter coats, and hygiene packs while building trust, often the first step toward longer-term support. Veteran-run nonprofits host weekly cookouts at makeshift camps, offering peer counseling and addiction workshops under the slogan, "This street is our front porch." In a classic travel documentary fashion, these unsung heroes reveal hidden acts of compassion that rarely make headlines. Faith-based coalitions have also mobilized at record speed. The Interfaith Action Network coordinates dozens of house churches that open their doors after sundown, transforming parish halls into sleeping quarters. Volunteers rotate shifts to ensure safe, welcoming spaces where residents can shower, charge phones, and access job placement services. Legal clinics staffed by pro bono attorneys take on eviction cases, often overturning unlawful displacement orders. Yet demand continues to outpace supply. Many nonprofits operate on razor-thin budgets, relying on constant donation drives and sporadic grant awards. Meanwhile, volunteers face burnout from trauma-laden encounters and bureaucratic hurdles when trying to coordinate with city agencies. How can these community forces sustain momentum in the face of an ever-growing crisis? The answer may lie in forging new public-private partnerships, which we'll explore next. International exemplars of housing solutions. New York's challenges are daunting, but it isn't alone. Other cities have tested experimental frameworks that could be adapted for the 5 boroughs. In Salt Lake City, the Housing First model, providing immediate access to permanent homes without preconditions, has cut chronic homelessness by 91% since 2005. Seattle's King County launched tiny home villages with wraparound case management, reducing emergency room visits and jail bookings among participants by nearly half. Meanwhile, Helsinki's Universal Housing Guarantee treats shelter as a legal right, housing every applicant in permanent apartments rather than transient shelters. These pioneering approaches share a common thread: dignity. By eliminating requirements like sobriety or mandatory check-ins, they trust individuals to stabilize their own lives once a safe home is guaranteed. Each model also integrates on-site health services, job training, and peer mentorship, fostering community rather than isolation. Could New York replicate Salt Lake's aggressive Housing First pledge? Or might tiny homes find a foothold in vacant lots across the Bronx? Adapting these blueprints will require political will, budget reallocation, and nimble zoning adjustments. But the potential payoff, a plunge in street encampments and a surge in self-sufficiency, could redefine the city's social contract. With proven alternatives mapped out, the next challenge is forging a shared vision for a New York where no one sleeps on the sidewalk. Articulating a vision for a homeless-free future. Imagine a New York where the morning commuter pauses not to step over worn tents, but to bid good morning to neighbors returning from a night in permanent housing. Picture community centers humming with job readiness classes, mental health check-ins, and art workshops, places that once housed parentheses now pulsing with purpose. Envision rooftop gardens atop former shelter buildings, tended by residents who've reclaimed both space and agency in their own lives. This isn't a utopian daydream. It's the promise embedded in each policy, each nonprofit kitchen, and each tiny home prototype. It's a promise that witness-based storytelling, a hallmark of any compelling travel documentary, can make real by spotlighting success stories alongside hard truths. When a former subway dweller steps onto a furnished apartment floor for the first time, that moment sparks a chain reaction: mental health breakthroughs, family reunifications, and renewed economic contributions. Realizing this vision demands sustained collaboration. City officials must keep budgets flexible, nonprofits need capacity building, and private developers should be incentivized to include social value in every blueprint. If we get it right, the streets that once echoed with shuffling feet and hushed despair can resonate, instead with confident footsteps and shared laughter. Conclusion. New York's homeless crisis is neither insurmountable nor abstract. It is a human story written on concrete and steel. Government interventions, grassroots ingenuity, and lessons from other cities all point toward a path forward, one that treats stable housing as a birthright, not a charity. As we close this chapter, remember that policy wins begin with public will, and public will ignites when individual stories break through the noise. Your awareness, your votes, and your volunteer hours can turn whispered dreams into everyday realities. Tonight, when the skyline lights up, let it reflect not only progress for the privileged, but the promise of home for every New Yorker once ignored.